we can safe to say that he has achieved more than most of us. Among other things, he's been awarded Nobel Peace Prize on his work on climate. Both as a leader, as a scientist, he's one of the world's most important advocates for a sustainable future. And we listen when he speaks. Along with President Obama and others, we sit quietly and listen to him as he speaks. He is the head of the IPCC. Please welcome on stage Rajendra Pachauri. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you?
Very well.
Yeah.
Couldn't be better.
We always have to say welcome to Bergen, and what do you think about Bergen?
Well, I'm reminded.
You had dinner yesterday, I know, with your friend Björn.
I'm reminded of a story when I came here first, and that was several years ago. I'm sure everybody in Bergen knows it, so I'd only be boring you about this little boy who talked about rain in Bergen. If you don't know it, well, I'll tell you quickly. There was this couple which had come as tourists, and they wanted to go out. It rained the first day, rained the second day, the third day. Finally, they said, let's go out, doesn't matter. And they saw a little boy over there, and they asked him, little boy, does it ever stop raining in Bergen? And his answer was, I don't know, I'm only 7 years old.
And obviously you tell this story and connect it to climate change when you tell it all over the world, I guess.
I have to be very careful, because when I talk about climate change, I don't talk about the weather. That's distinctly different from climate change.
Right.
But yes, it could be part of climate change.
We're really looking forward to your speech. And Sunday you presented the last part of the fifth main report on climate change. Before you have the speech, Björn, what is special about Mr. Pachauri's work, from your point of view?
Well, of course, first of all, it's that it is science-based. I mean, among all the roles Dr. Pachauri have, he is also a scientist. And for a company like us, we really, are using science and are inspired by science. So I think that is number one. Secondly, Dr. Pachauri always focused on the opportunities. And I think that's also why he inspires us, to see these challenges and see the risk through opportunities. So I think these are the two characteristics with Dr. Pachauri, and also why he inspires us.
Okay, good. So the stage is all yours, Mr. Pachauri. Looking forward to
thank
your
you.
speech.
Let me start by thanking Björn Höglund for his very kind and generous remarks. I also want to thank the Bergen Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Your Excellency, Madam Minister, for being present over here in this beautiful city that you belong to, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I was very happy to hear Her Excellency the Minister talk about the fact that Norway is going to make a transition to a knowledge economy, because clearly the 21st century is going to see an unprecedented development and application of knowledge. And it's going to be applied to every field of human endeavor. And one particular area where I think knowledge is going to be paramount is essentially dealing with climate change. And this is something that governments alone can't do. It's something that has to involve business and industry, civil society, research and academia, and of course every single individual, because we have a responsibility to this planet, and clearly each one of us has no place to go unless you want to take a one-way ticket to outer space. Richard Branson is organizing that. He's a good friend of mine. And he and I were actually in an event in California some years ago, and he said, well, somebody brought up the question of those who don't believe in climate science. He said, I have a very good solution. I have this space journey that's going to take place, and I know what to do with these guys. And somebody ascribed that to me, which was totally wrong. However, let me tell you about the IPCC. It was established in 1988, essentially as a result of a growing realization that we need to find out about what human actions are doing to the climate of this planet. So we were established by the United Nations Environment Programme and the World Meteorological Programme and ratified by the UN General Assembly. And the General Assembly, in the resolution which essentially gave official status to the IPCC, said that quite apart from carrying out a comprehensive assessment of climate change, we must also come out with realistic response strategies. Now, who's going to implement those realistic response strategies? Governments, of course, but most importantly, business and industry. And why should business and industry worry about dealing with climate change? My good friend, Bjorn Stigson, who used to be president of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, used to say, business cannot succeed in a society that fails. So you can't possibly have islands of success in the form of business and industrial entities when society all around is going to be impacted by the impacts of climate change. I recall when I received the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, in my acceptance speech on behalf of the panel, I used a Sanskrit phrase which is called Vasudeva Kutumbakam. And that essentially means that the universe is one family. And I'm afraid in our short-termism and our selfish and narrow interests, we have forgotten the fact that this world is interconnected. What happens in one part of the globe is going to impact on every other part of the globe. The IPCC is an intergovernmental body. It's not a UN agency. And if I can say so, thank God for that, because we don't have the bureaucracy that often goes with UN systems and procedures. And the manner in which we work, and I want to spend a little time explaining this because I hope the leaders of business and industry who've gathered over here would see the transparency, the objectivity, and the rigor with which we work. We start carrying out an assessment, organize what is called a scoping meeting where we may get 100 or 200 people to get together for 3 or 4 days, and these are specialists, scientists, government officials, and we come up with an outline of what should be the contents of a new report. What are the kinds of questions that we need to answer? How should it be structured? Then this outline is presented to the entire panel, which consists of 195 governments. They look at it, they might modify it, and then what comes out of it is the approved outline, which forms, in a sense, our mandate to carry out an assessment. Then we write to all the governments, international organizations, get nominations of authors with their CVs. And I'm happy to say in the last assessment, we got well over 3,000 nominations. We selected 831 authors and review editors, as they're called, and then we start work. And incidentally, these persons who devote their time and talent are not paid a penny by the IPCC. The only thing the IPCC spends on is the travel of developing country scientists and specialists, and nothing else. They work very hard. For 4 or 5 years, we bring out 3 volumes of report, which are really very, very thick. We call them the bricks, because they're really heavier than bricks, almost 1,000+ pages each. These are called the working group reports. In 2011, we also brought out 2 special reports, one of them on renewable energy sources and climate change mitigation, and the second on extreme events and disasters. So in the synthesis report, which came out on Sunday, the 2nd of November, we essentially synthesize all the information in these reports, and this is meant for you. It's meant for you, your CEOs, because the summary for policymakers, which forms part of this synthesis report, is only 40 pages. You can literally read it between here and Oslo when you fly from here to Oslo. Of course, when Bjorn Høgland and I were traveling, we both decided we need to take a little nap. So if you had given us the report, we wouldn't have read it. We were busy sort of catching up with our respective sleep. So Anyway, if you're awake, you can read it, you can get the essence of it, and let me tell you a few of the findings of this report. Firstly, it's unequivocally established that human actions are affecting the climate of this planet. And most of the warming that has taken place since the middle of the last century is extremely likely to have been the result of human actions. And when we use the term extremely likely, we are assigning a probability of 95% or more. Now, this is up from the last assessment in 2007, where we said very likely, and that meant 90% probability or more. All right? How is climate change manifesting itself? Sea level rise. Since the beginning of the last century up to 2010, average sea level rise has been 19 centimeters. And that's not uniform, this is the average. There are some parts which have got a far more severe case of sea level rise, others not quite so. There are impacts on agriculture, impacts on human health. A large part of the warming that has taken place between 1970 and 2010 has gone into the oceans. 90% of the heat that's been generated as a result of climate change has gone into the oceans. And therefore, the oceans have warmed to a depth of 700 meters. The other thing that's happened, which we need to be concerned about, is that 30% of the CO2 emitted since the beginning of industrialization has gone into the oceans. That led to ocean acidification, which is continuing. We also have to contend with the fact that extreme events have increased, particularly heat waves and extreme precipitation events. So much so, under some scenarios, we find that those parts of the world which would actually have a decline in rainfall on average would get the bulk of it in the form of extreme precipitation. That means heavy falls in a short period of time. Now, that clearly has implications for the safety of human beings, risks to human health and lives, as well as property. Another impact of climate change would be felt on agriculture. And if we look at the projections for the future, if we don't mitigate emissions of greenhouse gases, then by the end of the century, we could get temperature increase of up to 4.8 degrees Celsius. And that really is bad news. That would change the entire possibility for life on this planet. It would change the geography of this planet, because the extent of sea level rise that you would get would be just very, very difficult for all forms of life. And just to give you a figure, under a no mitigation scenario, the amount of sea level rise you could get is up to 0.98 meters. So that's almost a meter. There are parts of the world, small island states, low-lying coastal areas, which obviously would have the threat of submergence. But well before that, there would be storm surges, there would be coastal flooding, which would make it very difficult for people to live in those areas. I know a large number of industries are located in coastal areas because of the enormous advantage that you have being in a coastal location. Large part of the population of this world is in coastal areas. So this clearly represents a threat to them. Now, what can be done? Firstly, we need to adapt to the impacts of climate change. What are the kinds of adaptation measures we could take in hand? Well, a simple thing. As far as sea level rise is concerned, we would have to enforce coastal zoning restrictions far more effectively. You can't have buildings in coastal areas which are obviously going to be at risk on account of sea level rise, coastal flooding, storm surges, and so on. I have a good friend, Chad Holliday, and I don't mind mentioning that. He used to be chairman of the World Business Council and Sustainable Development, was chairman of DuPont, now he's chairman of Bank of America. He told me he has a house in the coastal area of Delaware. He says, I find it very difficult to get insurance because the insurance companies just feel that property like that is at risk. So I think we need to be very particular about ensuring that the impacts of climate change will not affect the value, the sustainability of assets that exist in these coastal areas. Impacts on human health will lead to higher absenteeism. If there are going to be heat waves, like in 2003, and I'm not suggesting that that was the result of climate change, but I will say categorically that events of that nature will increase in frequency and intensity. In fact, we projected that those heat waves, which currently are taking place once in 20 years, by the end of the century, if we don't carry out any mitigation, will occur once in 2 years. So those who are in business and industry will have to worry about that. So we need to adapt to the impacts of climate change. But we would reach thresholds, we would reach tipping points beyond which adaptation will become very, very challenging. So at the same time, we'll also have to mitigate the emissions of greenhouse gases, bring down these emissions. And if we want to keep temperature increase to below 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, then we would have to ensure that at that point of time, emissions of greenhouse gases are either zero or in the negative range. How can we do that? Renewable energy, high levels of energy efficiency, the use of carbon capture and storage, possibly nuclear energy if anyone wants to go for it, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And of course, in some sectors, you would also have to influence demand in a manner that it goes down. Transport is one of them. Buildings is another. These are areas where you can bring about some major structural changes by which the demand for energy would go down significantly. And the good news is that all of this can be done at cost, which will be positive, particularly since we have been increasing our emissions very rapidly. Therefore, it represents a very sharp change from business as usual. And to give you a number in terms of how we have increased our emissions recently, in 2010, the total emissions of greenhouse gases in the world were 49 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. You convert all the gases to a CO2 equivalent. What were they in the year 2000? 39 gigatons. That means in these 10 years, we have increased emissions at a phenomenally rapid rate. So this is something that needs to be reversed. What would be the cost of stringent mitigation? It would lead to a reduction of increase of global consumption or global GDP by 0.06% per year. And that clearly is not a high price to pay. It is a price, no doubt. The other benefit is that there are several co-benefits associated with mitigation actions. Higher energy security, lower levels of air pollution at the local level, perhaps higher employment, certainly much better health of ecosystems, higher agricultural productivity, and so on. So if you throw all that in, then clearly the cost might actually turn out to be negative. In other words, as they say in America, it's like dollar bills lying on the sidewalk. Why are we not picking them up? Because we've got to change our mindsets. We've got to look at knowledge, we've got to absorb that knowledge and internalize it, and set plans for business and industry that, as we heard earlier, convert this challenge into an opportunity. The opportunity exists in terms of higher levels of energy efficiency, where technology can make an enormous difference, movement towards low carbon or zero carbon forms of energy supply, also initiatives and opportunities by which we might develop bioenergy solutions, carbon capture and storage, and so on. So this is really the challenge for industry. And I think the time has come when all of us have to join hands together, be driven by knowledge. It was Einstein who said, problems can't be solved at the level of awareness that created them. Today we have the level of awareness which far transcends the ignorance that we had when we possibly created these problems. I mean, we didn't know that James Watt's steam engine would lead to emissions of carbon dioxide that would affect the climate of this planet, and so on. So my appeal would be to use this knowledge and to ensure that businesses and industry sees the opportunities inherent in this challenge and starts moving in a direction that goes far beyond short-term considerations, that looks at how we would create a much better planet, a much better future, not only for human society, but all living species. And this is essentially my appeal to you, and I hope you will all go to the website of the IPCC, read the summary for policymakers of the synthesis report. It's written in a manner that's meant for a non-specialist audience, and this is why we spent days and nights over a week getting approval of this summary for policymakers, which incidentally is approved word by all the governments of the world by consensus. And when you're going through that, there are times when you feel, my God, what a torture. But at the end of the day, what you get is a document that has the rigor of science behind it, but the ownership of all the governments of the world. And frankly, the language that you have over there gets improved through this process. Because, you know, when you have a sentence which is displayed on the screen for approval, some delegation will say, okay, I understand this, and you try to explain it to them. They'll say, but my minister will not understand it. Why don't you put it in so-and-so language? So in the course of that dialogue, in that discussion, the exercise that we go through, we actually come out with a document which is scientifically valid and robust, but it is also eminently more readable. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You said that businesses don't succeed in a society that fails. These businesses represented here, well, the CEOs and the senior management teams, they operate in a society that works. But what can one single CEO, one single person, how can they relate to this issue as business people?
Well, let me say this. I mean, Norwegian business has a large spread all over the world.
Right.
So does the economy of Norway. And therefore, you know, you might be catering to consumers in this country, but you also have ambitions of, you know, working globally. And if there's going to be a part of the world, I was once talking to the director of Nestle, he was very concerned about the impacts of climate change because he said our entire raw material chain is based on the stability of climate and the sustainability of nature. So, you know, Norway, and by nature, Norway is a country which has an enormous global presence. And you have to be concerned about what's going to happen in Malaysia, in Sudan, in Somalia. The two other points I want to make are, firstly, climate change is going to lead to displacement of people, and that's going to be a threat to every region of the world.
Especially rich countries.
Exactly. And secondly, it's also going to add to the drivers of conflict, which are poverty and other factors. So I want to emphasize once again, we're all members of and residents of spaceship Earth. There's no other place we have but to escape. So we need to take a global view for business, as well as very practical reasons.
When it comes to Norway's position and role as a rich country, you met the Prime Minister yesterday or the day before. What's your message to the Norwegian government?
Well, I basically told her about the findings of our synthesis report and the fact that we need to take science into account in our policies, in our actions, and in our efforts to mobilize society to deal with this problem of climate change.
So what kind of responsibility, what kind of role do you think that Norway should play in regards to the climate targets, the UN climate targets?
Well, Norway has
been... As an oil nation, too.
Norway has been very active globally. You can facilitate, you can assist several other countries in the world to deal with climate change, quite apart from what you do within your own territory. So I would say Norway has always taken and should continue to take a global view of what needs to be done to stabilize the climate of this planet.
And often in the local climate debate in Norway, we always say that, well, some people say that Norway should be an example because we are able to do it and we should do it. And if we're not doing it, why should other people or other countries, poorer countries, do? So in regards to as a role model, what do you think Norway should do?
Well, I would expect every country in the world to do what it can. And, you know, I believe that what Gandhi said was right. Be the change you want to see in the world. If we want to bring about change, then I think we have to be an important part of it ourselves. And I would say that to every country in the world.
We're going to talk about leadership and inspiring leadership. I said when you enter the stage that you are a leader that people see to and is inspired by. What kind of people and leaders are you inspired by?
Well, firstly,
you quoted Gandhi and...
Well, firstly, I don't know if I inspire anybody. I'm working very hard to inspire myself most of the time. Sometimes I succeed, most of the time I don't. But yes, the leader that really inspires me through his life was Gandhi. I mean, I always quote him extensively. He was a person who said, "My life is my message." And I want to tell you something that I've done with an organization that runs what is called the annual Nobel Peace Laureate Summit.
Right.
And it's tragic that Gandhi was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize so many times, and I can't think of a better candidate in the 20th century than him. But maybe there were powers at that point of time that didn't like him, detested him, and they intervened. I have no idea. So I've been saying that you should hold one of the peace summits, Nobel Peace Laureate Summit, in New Delhi as a tribute to Gandhi. And I'm happy I've got a decision to hold it in Delhi in 2016, because he's not there, but we should certainly pay tribute to someone who deserved to get the Nobel Peace Prize far beyond anybody else. And he's my source of inspiration. The man was strong, he was convinced about what he was doing, and he never got thwarted by opposition and problems, and stuck to his beliefs right till the end. If I could be even 100th in terms of the strength he had, I feel my life wouldn't have been wasted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Pachauri. An inspiration to everyone, and the only thing I have in common with him is probably the green and sustainable tie.